Welcome to my channel, Waiting on Parts. My name is Aldo, and on this channel you can expect me to build off-the-wall stuff. So that's what I have for you today. Today I'm gonna show you how I built this cabinet for my Bassman clone. It's a 5F6A. I use basic tools and no finger joining, so anyone could build this. And I'm gonna show you how. Two things to remember before we start. Table saws are very dangerous, and tube amps could potentially hold up to 500 volts even when unplugged. This was my sketch from when I originally designed this amp. This amp was visually inspired by the old Sano amps from the 50s and 60s with the wraparound grill. I did stray from my original design a little. Its design is a little impractical. It doesn't protect the tubes much, but practical wasn't what I was going for. I had to split up this long sheet of popular hardwood into manageable lengths. I cut each piece to nearly the correct length with the circular saw. Then I finished up the 45-degree cuts with the cross-cut sled for the table saw. I marked off the top and the bottom and the pieces that I'm going to scrap because of flaws in the wood. You might be able to get away without the cross-cut sled, but I didn't have very much luck without it. The cuts are pretty sloppy. This was a cut I made without the cross-cut sled, and it didn't come out so great. So now when I did it with the cross-cut sled, it came out perfect. So I continued making all 4 cuts like this. When gluing your box, make sure the 45-degree angles are clean and free of debris. Then apply a thin layer of glue to both mating surfaces. Use the clamps to hold the wood square, and then use the strap clamp to hold it firmly together. Then let it sit for 24 hours. I chose the KLD version of the Bassman 5F6A amp because of its ultra clean, no hum classic tube sound. The KLD clone has an adjustable bias built into it, which allows you to switch from KT88s, 6L6s, or EL34 power tubes, which is a really cool feature. I originally bought a new, modern 200-watt neodymium magnet speaker, thinking it would be cool in this cabinet. However, after hearing it, I realized I needed a more efficient speaker for this amp because of its low wattage. So I ended up going with an American-made Weber speaker, which is similar to what the Bassman came with originally. If you like this build, like and subscribe. In a couple weeks, I'm gonna take it to practice, and I'm gonna have some videos of it up loud. You can't purchase a piece of hardwood this size, so I had to glue 2 pieces together. I then glued and clamped it to the front of the speaker box. I then did a quick rough sanding with a belt sander. I did the fine stuff by hand. I then drilled some holes in the front panel and used a jigsaw to cut the opening for the speaker. The jigsaw left some cuts that weren't perfect, but I was able to go back and sand everything down and make it look good. These are the 2 sheets of solid wood that I glued together to mount the speaker to. I chose not to use particle board or plywood because the outside edges of the speaker are going to be thin, and I was concerned it was going to crack over time because of the vibrations. I made sure I could fit these small shims in around the edges of the front panel because of vibrations. I wanted to keep it to a minimum. I didn't want this thing to rattle when it was done. Here I marked from the front side where I want the speaker to be positioned. This way I know where to cut the hole. Put a nail in the center and a string and drew a circle and cut it out with a jigsaw. I cut a relief in the side panel to better fit the speaker. I later filled it with a thin sheet of wood and left the recess there so the speaker will fit in the cutout. So the internet said that Having all my tubes lined up in a row like that on the corner was gonna get the amplifier hot. Well, they were right, and so I decided to put a bass port right behind the power tubes. This way the movement of the speaker will actually help cool the tubes off, and here I put a light behind it so you could see where the hole is situated, right behind the power tubes. I cut the hole for the control panel in a couple steps. Had a couple complicated curves and it made it difficult. I cleaned up the cuts with a lot of sanding, as I did with the front side. I used 2.5-inch square stock tubing that I got at Industrial Metal Supply. I mounted the tubes directly to this. I figured it'd help dissipate the heat and I could polish it to a nice chrome finish. I carefully cut the faceplate off the KLD amplifier. I then extended the shielded wires using RCA cables. This way I could detach them. I could detach the faceplate from the amplifier, and I could also use plugs to detach the transformer and other wires from the faceplate. Had to make little socket extensions that sit under this aluminum plate here. I decided to extend the wires that run to the power transformer to the opposite side of the cabinet to better balance the box itself. I did this so that all the weight wasn't situated on one side, and when you picked it up from the handle, it was centered. I moved the faceplate to the top of the amplifier for better access. I used shielded wire with RCA plugs on them for the signal wires, and I used regular plugs for the other wires. I put this thick rubberized tape on the front of my cabinet to separate the speaker panel and the cabinet from each other and make sure there's no vibrations. I was probably a little overly concerned with vibrations, so I took additional steps to avoid rattles. I isolated the front speaker panel with this rubber tape, and I screwed it to the chassis using screws, and nowhere did this panel touch the cabinet. Last thing you want to do is build an amplifier that buzzes. Here you can see the gap from the speaker panel in the cabinet. It's basically fully floating. The screws are the only thing that hold it to the chassis. And with the 5F6A Bassman, I was really concerned that extending all these wires was gonna create hum, but the amp is still super quiet, just like when I bought it. Extending the tube sockets really isn't that hard. On the male plug, you go take a wire, run it from pin 2 to the pin 2 on the female socket. It's really quite that simple. The tricky part is on the power tube socket, you need to connect pins 1 and 8 together and run that wire to the male plug pin 1. So male plug pin 1 connects to both pin 8 and 1 on the socket on the power tube. And for the signal tubes, you got to run male plug pin 1 to socket pins 1 and 9 on the small tubes. How you're connecting that one pin to two wires on the socket, you're grounding the tube. If you forget to ground the tube, it will not work. So don't forget to do this step. Once you finish soldering the sockets and the plugs, I took the wires and I separated the signal wires away from the AC wires. This eliminates hum and any kind of interference. Here you can see the new Weber speaker. This speaker is rated at 50 watts max, which is better suited for a 25 watt amp than a 200 watt speaker, which I had before. This should make it sound better. Stay tuned. I'm gonna bring it to practice here in a couple weeks. I'm gonna have a buddy play through it at max volume and see how it sounds. Here I put the amp in and carefully make the connections that need to be made. This is kind of documenting where everything needs to go. If you like this build, like, subscribe. In a couple weeks, I'm going to bring it to practice, crank it up, and put it on video. Thanks for watching.